The world was quiet, too quiet. It was an ordinary day in a bustling city, with the sun shining down on streets filled with people. The aroma of coffee floated through the air as citizens moved about their daily routines. Commuters rushed to catch their trains, children laughed and played in the parks, and shopkeepers worked to stock their shelves. To any observer, it was just another typical morning on Earth. Yet, beneath the calm facade, something sinister was creeping closer, something no one could see coming. Above, unnoticed by anyone on the ground, an alien armada silently entered Earth's atmosphere. Massive ships, with dark, gleaming exteriors, hovered high above, cloaked in advanced stealth technology. The people below were oblivious, completely unaware of the imminent invasion. The first sign of trouble came not from the ships themselves, but from the sudden shift in the air. A strange hum reverberated through the ground, like the distant sound of thunder before a storm, but far too powerful to be natural. And then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. The sky cracked open like a giant's fist smashing through glass, and the alien ships made their move. Beams of scorching light shot down from the vessels, targeting the city's tallest buildings. The sound of explosions rang out like deafening drums of war. The very ground trembled as the ships unleashed orbital bombardments on Earth. The gleaming city streets were shattered, and towering skyscrapers crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. People screamed, their faces filled with terror, as the once peaceful world was thrown into chaos. Terror gripped the hearts of the masses, and people ran for cover. Cars slammed into each other in panic, and buildings collapsed, sending clouds of debris billowing into the sky. Amid the devastation, there was a group of soldiers who didn't flee. They stood tall, frozen in place, but not in fear. They were preparing for the battle ahead, knowing that this was no ordinary attack. This was the beginning of an invasion. Captain James Tanner, a battle-hardened veteran, looked up at the alien ships, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. His body had seen the ravages of war countless times, but this was different. The aliens were unlike anything Earth had ever faced. Advanced, merciless, and calculating. The odds were against them, the technology far beyond anything humanity had. Yet Tanner knew that there was one thing the aliens could not predict: the resilience of the human spirit. "Get ready, team," Tanner shouted to his squad, his voice steady, though his mind raced. The soldiers around him readied their weapons, their faces grim but determined. They were outgunned and outmatched, but they weren't here to surrender. They were here to fight, not for victory, but for survival. They were here to make sure their world didn't fall without a fight. Tanner's squad consisted of some of Earth's best soldiers. Each one had been through hell, yet none of them hesitated when the alien fleet arrived. The first 9 minutes of the invasion were chaos, but it wasn't chaos for the soldiers. It was an opportunity to show the invaders what it truly meant to face humanity. Tanner's team moved swiftly, weaving through the wreckage, engaging the alien forces with a fierce intensity. Alien drones appeared from the wreckage, sleek and powerful, armed with weapons that could vaporize a human in an instant. But the soldiers didn't falter. Their training kicked in, and they fought back with everything they had. The aliens had weapons capable of mass destruction, but the humans had something they didn't: courage. Tanner's team, though vastly outnumbered, fought with a determination that the aliens didn't understand. Their weaponry could tear through buildings, but it couldn't tear through the willpower of humans who had nothing to lose. Despite their deaths, despite the overwhelming odds, the soldiers fought on. Tanner led the charge, moving like a shadow through the ruins, his pulse steady. His soldiers followed his lead, and with every step, they pushed the invaders back, taking down drone after drone. The first wave of the alien fleet deployed robotic soldiers, giant, armored, and deadly. The humans had no chance against their strength, but they didn't need to win the battle. They just needed to slow the aliens down long enough for Earth's remaining defenses to activate. Tanner led his team into the heart of the chaos, dodging energy blasts and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. The ground shook beneath them as alien war machines unleashed their full fury, but the humans refused to retreat. Their resolve burned brighter than any alien weapon. As Tanner and his squad faced wave after wave of enemies, the aliens watched from their command ships, observing with growing confusion. The alien forces had believed that fear would break humanity. They had assumed that once the invasion began, the humans would panic and flee. But they were wrong. Tanner's squad, along with every other human soldier, fought with an intensity and bravery that no alien had ever seen. The aliens had expected humans to fear death, to submit under the weight of their superior technology. But that wasn't the case. The soldiers didn't fear death. They welcomed it. And the aliens were horrified by the realization. This was not a fight they could win with superior technology alone. They had underestimated humanity's most powerful weapon, the willingness to sacrifice everything for their planet, their people, and their freedom. Tanner's team moved through the city like ghosts in the storm. They fought for every inch of ground, for every life lost, for every ally who had fallen. With every moment, they proved the aliens' assumptions wrong. When one of Tanner's men, Private Rodriguez, was killed in the line of duty, Tanner didn't flinch. He paused for only a second, eyes narrowing, and then pushed forward with even more intensity. His soldiers followed his lead, refusing to let their fallen comrades' sacrifices be in vain. As the battle raged on, Tanner and his team took cover behind a damaged skyscraper. The sky above them was a war zone, with alien ships clashing against Earth's remaining forces. But Tanner's squad was undeterred. Their bodies were bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, but their hearts were strong. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the future of Earth. They fought because they knew they could never let the invaders win, not while they had breath in their bodies. The soldiers kept moving, even as their numbers dwindled. With each step, the message grew clearer to the aliens. Humanity was not afraid to die. They would face the end of the world with fire in their hearts, and they would never bow down. In the chaos of battle, a new sense of purpose emerged. The aliens thought they had the advantage, but they were wrong. They had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, the unyielding determination to fight for what was worth saving, no matter the cost. And as the sun set behind the destroyed skyline, it became clear this was only the beginning. The war had just begun, and humanity had already shown the invaders what they were made of. The devastation on Earth had only just begun. The city had been shattered, reduced to rubble. And yet, the fight wasn't over. As Commander Kale watched from the bridge of his warship, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His alien forces had already decimated several major cities on Earth. But the humans, they didn't break. They didn't flee. They didn't fall to their knees in fear. Instead, they fought back with an intensity that he had never encountered before. Commander Kale had led many successful invasions, and every time, fear had been their weapon. Fear of death, fear of destruction, fear of annihilation. His enemies would always surrender when their cities fell. That was the way of war. At least, that's how it had been for every other race they had conquered. But Earth's defenders, these humans, were different. They were far more resilient than Kel could have imagined. On the ground, Captain James Tanner and his team of soldiers had just witnessed the tragic loss of one of their own. Private Rodriguez had been killed in a brutal firefight. Yet, instead of succumbing to despair, Tanner and his squad tightened their grips on their weapons and pushed forward. They were soldiers, after all. It was what they did. Every loss only fueled their determination, and every battle was one step closer to defending their planet. The battle between humanity and the alien invaders continued to rage on. The human soldiers, armed with plasma rifles and high-tech gadgets, fought valiantly, launching an assault on the alien forces with an unmatched ferocity. The human ingenuity was evident in every attack. Where the aliens had technology that could obliterate entire cities in a matter of minutes, the humans used their resourcefulness to counter. They used their environment to their advantage, setting traps and executing ambushes that the aliens had not anticipated. Their weapons might have been more advanced, but humanity had something the aliens didn't: a deep-rooted will to survive and protect what they loved. Commander Kale watched from the safety of his command ship, growing more and more frustrated with each passing minute. He ordered his fleet to activate the advanced cloaking technology. The alien ships shimmered and disappeared from view. Kale had expected this move to turn the tide in their favor. With their ships hidden, they could move in undetected, take out any human resistance, and crush them once and for all. But to his surprise, the humans still detected them. They knew exactly where to strike, even without seeing the ships. How are they doing this? Kale growled, his frustration mounting. He had never faced an enemy that could fight back like this. His fleet had faced many technologically advanced species, and none had been able to detect their cloaked ships. But somehow, these humans, with their primitive technology and crude tools, had found a way to see through their cloaks. "Commander, it appears their devices are adapting to our cloaking systems," one of Kale's officers reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "How?" Kale demanded. "How can they adapt so quickly? We've never encountered such a resistance." The officer could only shake his head, unable to provide an answer. Kale's mind raced. The humans weren't just fighting with desperation. They were adapting, learning. They were figuring out the weaknesses of his technology faster than he could adjust. It was as if they had no intention of losing. And in a way, they were right. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting because they had something the aliens could never understand: their love for their home and their people. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late. On the ground, Tanner and his team continued to engage the alien forces, not giving an inch. They used their own AI-powered devices to locate and track the cloaked ships, turning the aliens' most powerful weapon against them. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about surviving, outsmarting the invaders at every turn. With every alien ship that fell, the soldiers' morale grew. But for Tanner, it wasn't just about survival. It was about making a statement. He wasn't just fighting for Earth. He was fighting for his comrades, for his fallen brothers and sisters, and for every human who refused to let fear dictate their fate. The fight escalated as plasma bolts lit up the darkened sky, cutting through the air like streaks of lightning. Robotic drones, sent by the aliens to take control of key points on the planet, surged forward. The human soldiers, now more organized than ever, pushed back. Tanner's squad had set up an elaborate defense perimeter, using the ruins of the city as cover. Each soldier was in position, working in perfect synchrony. As the alien drones neared, Tanner issued a signal, and his team opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the drones with precision, and explosions rocked the streets as the alien forces scrambled to regroup. Tanner's heart raced as he moved through the chaos. He saw his comrades, each one pushing themselves beyond their limits. One soldier, Sergeant Olivia Brooks, was standing in the middle of the street, firing her weapon at a group of approaching alien soldiers. A blast from an alien plasma gun grazed her shoulder, but she didn't falter. Instead, she gritted her teeth and kept firing, knocking out one alien after another. Tanner watched, his chest swelling with pride. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were proving that they would never back down. As the alien forces began to retreat, Commander Kale's voice echoed through the communication channels. His tone was filled with fury and disbelief. "Withdraw. All units retreat to the ships. This human resistance cannot be crushed by force alone." Kale's orders came too late. The humans had already turned the tide of the battle. The aliens had thought they could conquer Earth by sheer force, by overwhelming humanity with their superior technology and weaponry. But what they hadn't counted on was the strength of the human spirit. Kale had spent years studying other species, studying their weaknesses, their fears, and every race he had encountered had shared one common trait: fear. Fear of death. Fear of losing everything. That fear had always been their undoing. But the humans, these humans, had no fear, and it terrified him. As the alien ships retreated into the dark void of space, Kel's mind raced. He had expected an easy victory. He had expected the humans to break, to beg for mercy when their cities were destroyed. But they didn't. Instead, they fought back with everything they had. And in doing so, they had shown him that they were not like any enemy he had ever encountered. Humanity's resolve was unbreakable, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. The aliens had learned that humans would never bow down to anyone, not even to an enemy as powerful as they were. And as Commander Kale looked out over the battlefield, watching the last of his forces retreat, he realized one thing. This war was far from over. It had only just begun, and humanity had already proven that they would fight for their world with everything they had, without fear, without hesitation, and without mercy. The invasion was far from won, but the aliens now knew something they hadn't expected. Humanity would never go down without a fight. The battle was far from over, and the war on Earth had only just begun. The human forces had dealt a blow to the alien invaders, but the aliens weren't ready to give up. Far from it. Commander Kale, the leader of the alien fleet, watched as his forces regrouped in space, preparing for their next move. The defeat on Earth was a shock to him, but he knew it wouldn't be their last. The human resolve had surprised him, but he was confident that the sheer power of his advanced alien technology would eventually overwhelm them. Back on Earth, the human forces were recovering from their victory, but the scars of the battle were still fresh. Captain James Tanner, who had seen his share of horrors in the past, felt the weight of each life lost in the conflict. His squad was down to a handful of soldiers, and every day they had to push harder, fight smarter, and adapt to the new threats that the aliens were sending their way. But Tanner wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not ever. The aliens had been relentless in their pursuit of victory. They had deployed new tactics, including eye-controlled drones and robotic soldiers that seemed unstoppable at first. These new machines were unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. Advanced, fast, and deadly. But humans were nothing if not resourceful. Every time the aliens unveiled a new weapon, humanity adapted. They used their ingenuity, their creativity, and their will to survive to find a way to counter the alien threat. Tanner and his squad had been briefed on the aliens' next move. The aliens had established a mothership, a massive fortress that was well protected by a fleet of warships and advanced defense systems. The humans' only hope of winning this war was to strike at the heart of the alien command, to infiltrate the mothership and destroy it from within. Tanner, a seasoned leader, knew that this mission was dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. As Tanner gathered his squad for the mission, he noticed the look in their eyes. They were scared, not of dying, but of losing their planet, their homes, their families. The fear of failure was greater than the fear of death itself. Tanner knew that he was asking a lot from them, but this was the moment they had to seize. It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to turn the tide in humanity's favor. Sergeant Olivia Brooks, one of Tanner's most trusted soldiers, checked her gear one last time. Her expression was focused, her jaw set in determination. "We're going to need more than luck on this one," she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "But we're not going to let them win, are we, Captain?" "No," Tanner replied firmly, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma rifle. "We're going to win this war, together." The mission was risky, but the soldiers knew what they were fighting for. As the team moved out, they were met with alien resistance. Drones swarmed from every direction, but the humans didn't falter. They'd fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses to outmaneuver and destroy the advanced machines. The battle was fierce, with close-quarters combat and explosions that shook the earth beneath their feet. Through the chaos, Tanner's mind stayed focused. The mission was too important to get distracted. He had to get to the mothership. He had to strike at the heart of the alien command, if humanity was going to stand a chance. As he led his squad through the war-torn streets, they came across a group of civilians trapped in a building. Without hesitation, Tanner ordered his team to stop and help them. They had to protect what was left of their world, no matter how small the victory. It was then that the unthinkable happened. A sudden explosion rocked the area, and Sergeant Bonner, one of Tanner's closest allies, was caught in the blast. Tanner rushed to his side, but it was too late. Bonner was already fading, his life slipping away with each passing second. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his body covered in burns from the explosion. Tanner knelt beside his friend, holding Bonner's hand as the man struggled to speak. "Captain," Bonner gasped, his voice weak. "Don't stop fighting for us." Tears welled up in Tanner's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He couldn't. Not now. Not when his team needed him the most. Bonner had given his life for this fight, and Tanner wasn't going to let his sacrifice be in vain. He looked his dying friend in the eye and made a silent promise. "I won't," Tanner whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "We're going to end this. For you." With Bonner's death, the stakes had become even higher. Tanner could feel the weight of the loss in his chest, but it wasn't just the pain of losing a friend. It was the burning desire for revenge. He knew that the only way to honor Bonner's memory was to finish what they had started. They had to strike back. They had to win, no matter the cost. The squad pressed on, now with a renewed sense of urgency. Tanner led them through the city streets, each step bringing them closer to the mothership. They fought harder than ever before, knowing that the aliens would stop at nothing to crush them. As they neared the enemy ship, the aliens sent more reinforcements, new eye-controlled drones that seemed to appear out of thin air. But Tanner and his squad didn't flinch. They had lost too much already to let this opportunity slip away. Finally, after hours of fighting, they reached the mothership. The massive vessel loomed above them, its dark metallic surface gleaming in the moonlight. Tanner's heart raced as he looked up at it. This was it, the heart of the alien command. He knew that this mission would determine the fate of humanity. But even as they prepared to board the mothership, Tanner could feel the weight of Bonner's sacrifice pushing him forward. Every step was fueled by the memory of his fallen comrade, and every action was a step toward the ultimate victory. They had already lost so much, but now they would fight for everything they had left. As they breached the mothership's defenses and made their way inside, Tanner's mind raced with thoughts of the war to come. The aliens had underestimated humanity. They had thought that fear of death would break them, that the sight of their cities burning would make them surrender. But they had been wrong. Humanity wasn't afraid to die for what they loved. They had no fear of death. They were driven by something far stronger, an unyielding resolve to protect their home, their people, and everything they held dear. And now, Tanner and his squad were about to strike at the heart of the alien invasion. The fate of the planet rested in their hands, and they would stop at nothing to see it through. The aliens had made one grave mistake. They had underestimated the power of the human spirit. And in the end, it was that spirit that would carry humanity to victory. The war was far from over, but Tanner knew one thing for certain. They would never give up. Not as long as they had breath in their bodies, not as long as there was still hope to be found. And no matter how many battles they had to fight, they would keep pushing forward. For Bonner, for Earth, for humanity. The war between humans and aliens had taken a turn that no one expected. The aliens, led by Commander Kale, had anticipated a quick and easy victory. With their advanced technology and seemingly unbeatable weapons, they thought humanity would break after the first strike. They thought fear would make humans bend and eventually surrender. But instead, the humans, led by Captain James Tanner and his squad, had done the unthinkable. They fought back. Despite overwhelming losses, despite their cities being reduced to rubble and their people dying by the thousands, the humans continued to press on. Commander Kale, watching from his command center aboard the alien mothership, could hardly believe what he was seeing. The human forces, battered and bruised, were still moving forward with relentless fury, attacking alien forces with unmatched courage. The aliens had superior technology, AI-controlled drones, cloaking devices, and robotic soldiers, but none of that seemed to matter. No matter how many weapons the aliens threw at the humans, they just kept coming. They fought not because they had to, but because they were fighting for something far more powerful: love, home, family, and everything they held dear. The aliens had underestimated this. They had underestimated the power of the human spirit. Kale paced across the floor of his command center, his mind racing with disbelief and anger. How was this possible? Why weren't the humans afraid? Why didn't they panic when their world was crumbling before them? It didn't make sense. His species had conquered countless worlds, and yet these humans, who were supposed to be insignificant, weak, were giving his forces more trouble than they could have ever imagined. He watched as his soldiers hesitated before engaging the humans, their weapons raised, but their eyes uncertain. The humans didn't fear death. They didn't flinch when their comrades fell. Instead of running, they attacked. The alien soldiers, who had once prided themselves on their advanced technology and superiority, were now beginning to crack under the pressure. Some of them began questioning whether they could truly defeat these humans, who were now fighting with a vengeance, refusing to back down. The aliens were used to seeing fear in their enemies. It was the one thing they had come to rely on in every battle. Fear of death was their greatest weapon, but humanity's refusal to fear was now their greatest strength. They had never faced an opponent like this before, one that was willing to die to protect their world. It was a concept that even their advanced AI systems couldn't fully comprehend. Commander Kale was furious. He couldn't let this stand. He had to crush this rebellion, this human spirit that was proving to be so much more powerful than his superior technology. It was time to finish this once and for all. He ordered a full-scale assault to wipe out the remaining human resistance. He would unleash everything he had, every weapon, every soldier, every advantage. The humans would break under the weight of it all. They had to. As the alien forces readied their attack, Captain Tanner and his squad were already planning their counterattack. They had seen the alien tactics before: intimidation, overwhelming firepower, and the use of advanced cloaking technology to strike from the shadows. But the humans had adapted. They were no longer caught off guard. They had learned the alien strategies and were ready for whatever came next. Tanner knew they had to strike the heart of the alien invasion, the mothership. That was their last chance to take down the alien command structure and cripple their war efforts. The battle began again, fiercer than before. The sky above was filled with the hum of alien warships and the deafening sound of plasma weapons discharging. On the ground, humanity's resistance was showing no signs of slowing down. Tanner and his squad fought through the chaos, dodging laser fire, taking out alien drones, and pushing forward, always forward. They fought with a determination that was unmatched, and as they infiltrated the alien mothership, the horror began to set in for the invaders. The humans were inside. They had breached the heart of their command. The mothership was unlike anything the humans had ever seen, an enormous, towering structure of cold metal and alien architecture. The walls were lined with eye-controlled defenses that could detect the smallest movement, but the humans were ready. They had developed their own countermeasures, using whatever technology they could salvage from fallen alien soldiers. They had learned quickly and adapted faster. Tanner's team, battle-worn and bloodied, navigated the dark corridors of the ship. They had no room for mistakes. The aliens had every advantage, but the humans had something they didn't: heart. They fought with everything they had, knowing that the fate of Earth was in their hands. As they made their way toward the central command room, they encountered more resistance: alien soldiers, robotic drones, and automated defenses. But they kept moving, never slowing down, never hesitating. The aliens, watching from their command center, began to panic. Their once impenetrable mothership was being invaded. The eye-controlled defenses were being overwhelmed by the humans' ingenuity. The cloaking devices that had given them the upper hand in previous battles no longer seemed effective. The humans had adapted to them. Every weapon the aliens used seemed to be countered by the humans' resourcefulness. Tanner and his squad were unstoppable. Commander Kale watched helplessly as his forces were pushed back. His cold, calculated leadership had worked in countless other battles, but not this time. This time, the humans were different. They were relentless. They didn't fear death. They didn't fear anything. As Tanner's team reached the heart of the mothership, they came face to face with the alien command center. The core of the ship was heavily guarded, but it was their only target. With one final push, the humans fought their way inside. The core was their only chance to cripple the alien fleet and stop the invasion. They planted explosives at key points, knowing that once the charges were detonated, the mothership would be destroyed, along with the alien command. Tanner, his team beside him, watched as the countdown to the explosion began. They had done it. They had reached the heart of the invasion and were about to strike the final blow. The alien forces outside were in disarray, their most powerful weapons failing to stop the humans. The AI-driven leadership was collapsing. The aliens had underestimated the resilience of humanity, and now they were paying the price. As the countdown ticked away, the horror set in for Commander Kale. His fleet, his army, everything he had built, was crumbling. And the humans weren't afraid. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't afraid of death. They were going to win. The humans had done the impossible, and the aliens were helpless to stop them. The war wasn't over yet, but the aliens now knew something they hadn't before. They were no longer the ones in control. Humanity was fighting with everything they had, and that, more than anything else, was what terrified the aliens the most. The battle for Earth had reached its breaking point. Tanner and his team had fought through insurmountable odds to reach the heart of the alien mothership. They were exhausted, battered, and bloodied, but they were determined. There was no turning back now. This was the final stand, the last hope for humanity. As they infiltrated the alien vessel, they could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on them. This was a mission of no return. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about ensuring humanity's survival. The alien mothership was a labyrinth of high-tech corridors and darkened rooms, its cold, metallic walls pulsating with the hum of alien technology. The air was thick with tension as Tanner led his squad through the maze, moving swiftly, with every step more calculated than the last. They had breached the ship, but they knew it wouldn't be long before the alien forces came after them. The drones, the eye-controlled robots, they were all closing in. But they had one advantage the aliens could never account for: human ingenuity. As they advanced deeper into the ship, the alien drones began to appear in the shadows, their glowing eyes scanning for intruders. Tanner didn't hesitate. He motioned for his team to take cover and opened fire. The sound of gunfire and plasma blasts echoed through the ship's corridors as they fought off wave after wave of robotic enemies. The aliens had always relied on their advanced technology, but the humans, despite being outmatched in terms of firepower, were relentless. They adapted on the fly, using every available resource to stay one step ahead. Tanner's heart pounded in his chest as he pressed forward, knowing the clock was ticking. Every second brought them closer to the core of the mothership, where the explosives were set to detonate. But it also brought the aliens closer to them. Tanner's mind raced as he calculated their next move. They couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Finally, they reached the central chamber, the core of the alien vessel. It was an enormous room, filled with advanced technology and alien machinery. Tanner knew this was their moment. He motioned for his squad to take positions while he set the final charges. They had come this far. They had fought tooth and nail to get to this point. Now, they just needed to make sure the alien fleet wouldn't recover. As Tanner planted the explosives in the core, a sense of finality washed over him. There was no way they could all make it out in time. The explosion would be massive. It would tear through the mothership, crippling the alien fleet and dealing a devastating blow to the invaders. But Tanner knew, deep down, that this was the only way. He had come to terms with the fact that his life was expendable if it meant saving billions of others. The countdown began. 30 minutes, Tanner muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the noise of the ship's engines. He could feel the sweat on his brow as he set the last charge. He looked over at his team, knowing that they had done all they could. They had given everything they had to get here. But now, the sacrifice would fall to him. The aliens had been relentless in their pursuit of victory, thinking their technology and strategies would ensure a swift conquest. They had never expected the humans to fight this hard. And they certainly never imagined that they would encounter warriors who would be willing to die for the chance to protect their homes. But now Tanner realized that there was no other option. He was going to stay behind. His eyes met those of his closest comrades, Sergeant Bonner, Corporal Reeves, and Lieutenant Carter, each of them understanding what had to be done. The mission would only succeed if the charges detonated in the core, and that was only possible if someone stayed behind to ensure they went off. Tanner was that person. He was the one who had led them this far. He was the one who would finish it. As the countdown to the explosion began, the tension in the air was palpable. Tanner's squad started to make their way back toward the exit, but Tanner remained rooted in place, his eyes on the countdown timer. The seconds felt like hours. Every moment he stood there, waiting, made it more real. He had made peace with his fate. There would be no running, no escaping. This was his final mission. "Go," Tanner commanded softly, his voice steady. "I'll hold them off." "No, Tanner, you're not." Bonner started, his face etched with disbelief and frustration. But Tanner interrupted him, his tone unyielding. "I'm staying. This is the only way." The squad hesitated, but they knew there was no arguing with him. They were soldiers, trained to follow orders, and Tanner's order was clear. He would stay behind, ensuring the explosives went off, and they would escape. He had made the ultimate choice, one that no one could have predicted, but that was necessary for the survival of the human race. With a heavy heart, the squad reluctantly made their way back toward the ship's exit. They had to escape while there was still time. As they ran through the corridors, Tanner stayed behind, his eyes locked on the countdown. He was not afraid. His mind was clear. His heart was set on the mission. This was what he had trained for. This was what he was meant to do. Meanwhile, the alien forces were growing more desperate. The sudden breach in their mothership had caused chaos, and their attempts to repel the human invaders were failing. Commander Kale, watching from his ship, couldn't believe what was happening. His soldiers were losing ground. His fleet was falling apart. The human forces were still pushing forward, determined to fight to the bitter end. Kale had never imagined the humans would be capable of such resilience. Their soldiers were dying, but they were not breaking. They were fighting like they had nothing to lose, like their very survival depended on it. And, in a way, it did. As Tanner's team reached the exit, he took one last look at the explosives, watching the timer tick down. His mind flashed through memories of his family, of his comrades of Earth. They would live on, thanks to the sacrifice he was about to make. The explosion rocked the entire ship. A blinding flash of light filled the chamber as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the alien mothership. Tanner was consumed by the blast, but he knew that his death had secured humanity's victory. The ship began to crumble, and the alien forces, stunned by the loss of their command ship, were forced to retreat. Their once unstoppable forces were now shattered. Commander Kale, watching from his vessel, was horrified. The destruction was beyond anything he had expected. The ship was breaking apart. His forces were retreating. And then it hit him. The humans had won. They had done the impossible. They had sacrificed everything to protect their world. And now the invaders were in full retreat. Kel's mind raced. trying to process the devastation. His fleet was in disarray. His soldiers were fleeing. The humans had shown him something he had never seen before, an unwavering will to fight, even in the face of certain death. The aliens had believed their superiority would guarantee their victory, but they were wrong. Humans weren't just survivors. They were warriors. And that, more than anything, terrified Kale. The war wasn't over, but the aliens had learned a valuable lesson. The human spirit was unstoppable, and no matter how advanced their technology was, it could never break the will of those willing to fight for everything they loved. The smoke was still thick in the air. The once bustling cities lay in ruins, their towering skyscrapers reduced to nothing more than smoldering husks. The streets, now eerily silent, were littered with the remnants of a battle that had nearly torn the world apart. Yet, in the midst of the devastation, something extraordinary had happened. Earth had stood firm. Humanity had triumphed. The alien fleet, once so sure of its superiority, was now in full retreat. The invaders had underestimated humanity, believing their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers would guarantee victory. But they hadn't accounted for the indomitable human spirit, for the courage, resilience, and sheer determination that burned in the hearts of those who fought to protect their home. They hadn't expected humans to refuse to die without a fight. As the alien ships fled toward the outer reaches of the galaxy, Commander Kale watched from the comfort of his vessel. His eyes were fixed on the planet below, Earth, the cradle of humanity. The sight of it, so full of life yet so scared by war, stirred something deep within him. He had thought the humans weak, primitive even, but he had learned a harsh truth in the heat of battle. Humans were a force to be reckoned with. They would not bend. They would not break. Cal's mind raced as he considered the consequences of the defeat. The Galactic Council, which had been so confident in their ability to crush humanity, would have to reevaluate their entire approach. They had believed their superior technology, their AIs, their vast fleets of ships, would be enough to subjugate Earth. But now, with their mothership destroyed, their forces scattered, and their leadership in chaos, the Council would be forced to face the reality that humanity had not only survived, but had fought back with a fierceness that no one had expected. Tanner's sacrifice, the final act that sealed the fate of the alien invasion, had become a symbol of humanity's strength. The memory of his selflessness, of his willingness to give up everything for the survival of his people, would live on forever. A statue was erected in his honor in the heart of one of Earth's remaining cities, a tribute to the man who had led his team to victory and ultimately sacrificed himself for the greater good. The statue stood tall, a reminder to all that the human spirit could not be extinguished, no matter the odds. The world, still scared by the violence of the war, began to rebuild. People came together in ways they never had before. Nations that had once been divided now stood united in their determination to heal and move forward. The war had taken its toll. Countless lives had been lost, families torn apart, and cities destroyed. But it had also brought humanity closer than ever. The common threat had forged bonds that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. The human race had proved that when faced with the darkest of times, they would rise to meet it, not as individuals, but as one united force. The message that humanity had sent to the galaxy was clear. They may be underdogs, but they would never be cowed. They had shown that no matter the odds, no matter the technology or the enemy they faced, they would fight with everything they had to protect what was theirs. They were survivors, warriors, and now, the galaxy would know them as a force that would never be defeated. On Earth, life began to return to a semblance of normality. The fields, once scorched by the heat of battle, began to green again. People returned to their homes, to their loved ones, and to their work. The cities, though still bearing the scars of war, slowly began to rebuild. It would take time, but humanity had proven that nothing could break them. As they rebuilt their cities, they also rebuilt their hope for the future. But the war was not over for Commander Kale. As he gazed at the planet from the viewports of his ship, He knew the reality of the situation. His forces had failed. The human resistance had triumphed against all expectations, and though the battle had ended, the implications of this loss would be felt across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, which had once viewed humanity as nothing more than an insignificant species, would now have to confront the uncomfortable truth. The humans were not just survivors. They were warriors, and they would not be easily defeated. Cal's thoughts turned to the future. The alien fleets, having suffered massive losses, would retreat to lick their wounds. But Cal knew it was only a matter of time before the Galactic Council would regroup. They would study their defeat, learn from it, and adapt. And when the next battle came, Cal was certain that the humans would be ready. The galaxy, for all its technological advancement and its alien might, had now witnessed the strength of a species that had been underestimated for too long. For Cal, this was a sobering realization. He had spent so much of his life believing in the superiority of his people, relying on their technology and tactics to guarantee success. But humanity had shattered that illusion. The humans, with their raw determination and refusal to yield, had proven that the heart of a warrior was far more powerful than any machine. As Cal's ship drifted away from Earth, he took one final look at the planet below. It was a world scared by war, but it was also a world that had shown the galaxy the true meaning of strength. He couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for the humans. They had been tested to their limits, and they had emerged victorious. Their message was loud and clear. They would never be cowed. They would never be conquered. The fear that humanity had instilled in the hearts of the invaders would linger long after the war ended. It was a fear that would echo through the halls of the Galactic Council, a fear that would change the course of history. The humans had proven that they could face down impossible odds and emerge victorious. They had shown the galaxy that their spirit could not be broken, no matter the cost. And so, as the alien fleet retreated into the darkness of space, humanity stood triumphant. The war was over for now, but the future had been forever changed. The humans, once seen as weak and insignificant, had proven their worth. They had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious, their spirit unbroken, their resolve unshaken. And now, the galaxy would know the truth. The humans were not to be underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with.